Did you know that the Gardener's Workshop offers online courses? Whether you're a gardener or a flower farmer, we cover it all, allowing you to increase your skills at your own pace. So check out our full list of courses today at thegardenersworkshop.com. The Gardener's Workshop, turning all thumbs green.
Whether you dream of being a flower farmer or you just want to grow flowers for your kitchen table, I'm Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I grew cut flowers commercially for nearly 25 years. Now, as an author and online course instructor, I hope to inspire the next generation of growers. I'm glad you're here. Let's jump in. Hey friends, I am going to share with you today a workshop I did covering the most frequently asked questions, along with some myths that we see out there rolling around on the internet about flower farming. And, I just want to really bust those babies wide open. I hope that this video will reveal the truth that anyone that is willing to put in the work, the right work, the necessary work, can become a flower farmer and a confident, successful flower farmer. So let's take a watch of what it takes to be a flower farmer. Hey, everybody, coming to you this afternoon from Southeastern Virginia. My name is Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I am so glad that you've decided to join me here for this webinar of what it takes to be a flower farmer. And I want to tell you first, the reason that I'm doing this webinar is that I get so many questions and people are so curious, and I know a lot of people are even dabbling in flower farming, people that just love gardening and are trying their hand at it. And so my hope is that this talk is really going to reveal some doorways for you that perhaps you will walk through if you decide that you do, in fact, want to become a flower farmer. And while I cannot possibly cover all the how-tos to be a flower farmer, I can show you the way of how you can have all those resources and get all that information. When I got started 21 years ago flower farming, I knew just enough to really get into trouble, right? And there really are better ways. So what it takes to be a flower farmer. So that's what we're talking about. So first I want to talk about what it does not take. And I wanted to hit this right off because I thought that I couldn't be a flower farmer. But what it does not take acres of land. You do not have to have a tractor. I didn't have a tractor for the first 10 or 11 years that I farmed. You do not have to have hoop or greenhouses, because I still don't have either one of those. And you don't have to have a cooler. I farmed for many years before I got a cooler, and I still know that I know several large growers that still don't have a cooler. It really all depends. Let's just say, for instance, if you aren't going to have a cooler or you don't, there's just certain things you don't even think about growing, right? Like tulips and lilies. You don't grow those crops if you don't have a cooler. And really a lot of it also depends on how quickly you're going to move your flowers. We happen to move our flowers really fast, meaning almost less than 36 hours they're out of here. So that's what you do not have to be a flower farmer, right? So this is what it does take to be a flower farmer. And what you do have to have is determination. And I will tell you that some of the flower farmers that I know are the most determined people around. They are such go-getters, and that is a huge benefit. And a really difficult one that many of us struggle with, I know I personally did, is the wisdom to go slow and learn. We all want to grow everything right away. As I often say now, we're all in elementary school, let's just say, as a new grower, and we want to do graduate work. Right? We want to grow the stuff that, people that have been growing for years are growing. And then you have to have a love of growing and gardening. You got to have that. You want to be outside. You want to be outdoors. I mean, I love being outside, and I particularly appreciate getting hot and dirty. That just is something that it doesn't bother me or upset me at all. I do know people that's not a good part for them. Also, you have to have an appreciation of physical work. Nothing is more satisfying to me than tilling a garden, weeding a bed, and standing up and looking at the results. You have to have that appreciation to really go the long haul in this business, because as every business is hard, this is really, really hard. If you have to struggle to do physical work, and it's not that I loved being hot, but that's just part of it. And part of my planning is I figure out ways for us to be done with our outdoor work by the time noon comes around, because the heat in the afternoon here in southeastern Virginia is just incredibly difficult in the middle of the summer. And then the things you really have to have is you have to have a spot of land in the sun. Many of you know a little bit about me. I'll tell you in just a minute on how small my space is. And you really have to have time to start a business, right? If you're working full time and you have a young family, it is not very likely that you're going to have the time. This is a business that you're considering jumping into, right? You have to have some time each day of the work week to designate to this business. And then I wrote funding here. You can start a flower farm, as I did, on a shoestring budget. And that's one of the things that I believe is the best way to get started. But you have to have a little bit of cash. I don't think you should start a business on a credit card. And so you have to come up with some cash somewhere, somehow, to have literally seed money, right? And a little bit more. Now, I was perhaps the most unlikely candidate to become a flower farmer. First off, I was barely a novice gardener. I had been gardening in shade, deep shade. You know the story. I met this guy. He came with this great piece of land and all this sunshine. And I really didn't know what I was doing. So it was pretty unlikely. And I still do live in the middle of the city of 200,000 residents. And while that is some issues, it also brings some gifts with it. But people just can't believe where I live still and do what I do. And then also, when I first started farming, our piece of property was only 1.17 acres, and my home and a couple accessory buildings were also on that land. So I literally only had 2 small quarter-acre gardens, and I did it really well, actually, for the first 10 years. And I really didn't know anything about farming other than I read the book that many people do, and I recommend, if you haven't read it, is The Flower Farmer by Lynn Byczynski. And believe it or not, this is aging me, I had no social media backup, meaning I couldn't jump on something and get an immediate response from somebody. So it was really just not very likely that I could be a flower farmer. Nobody really believed it in the beginning but me. And of course, my husband, he was very encouraging for me to do that. But I just am trying to draw the picture for you that really anybody can be a flower farmer if you're determined enough, right? And I actually started realizing probably about 5 to 6 years ago that those restrictions, not having much space, having to go slow because I had no real funds, I couldn't rush out and buy thousands of dollars worth of bulbs and structures and equipment, that those restrictions literally fueled my success. They are a big part of why, because really those things that literally grow organically, I don't mean like growing in a garden, I mean business, relationships, those things that naturally happen at a good speed have the ability to last longer, to go the mile. And I attribute all of what I went through to starting small and growing slow. That gave me time literally to figure out how to farm, because if you're going from a gardener to a farmer like I was, and I wasn't even really a gardener, right? That's a huge learning curve. I hear that from people all the time. First off, commercial farming has a lot of great shortcuts that the general gardening world didn't know about. So it really gives you time to digest that, and you learn how to plan and then manage a large garden. How many people do you know that all they talk about is being overcoming weeds? Well, commercial farmers prevent weeds. we don't have time to overcome them either, but we know how to prevent them, right? And so going slow allowed me to get my systems to figure out how to prepare soil, how to plant, how to start seeds, how to maintain that garden, how to harvest it, how to condition flowers, and better yet, how to sell the flowers, right? I mean, and I have spoken to these people that have grown enormous volumes of beautiful flowers because they had access to be able to do that, and they had no markets to sell their flowers in. There is nothing more discouraging, y'all. I mean, that really fizzles you out and really prevents you from perhaps really getting the best start in your business. And because for me, I had the opposite problem because I started small. So my first garden was only a 1/4 acre. Now, don't get me wrong, that garden was producing a couple or 3,000 stems of flowers a week my second year in. So I had a lot of flowers. But because I went slow and had time to develop my customer base while I was learning to farm, I always had more customers wanting flowers than I had flowers. And that can really be a problem. It can be stressful too, but it's a really great problem to try to figure out. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that there's a reason we feel so overwhelmed when we start jumping into this when we're not prepared. Because starting a business, most people that I talk to, the largest percentage, is starting a business for the first time. And that in itself is a big bite, right? And then there's those of us that are going from a gardener to a farmer. Now, I do speak to, there's a small percentage of folks that have been going from a gardener to a farmer. I do speak to some folks that have been vegetable farmers that are now making the switch over or adding flowers. And so they have a little, one little notch for them. But these are two huge endeavors. And that's why it feels so overwhelming. And that is perfectly normal. So let's talk a little bit about flower farming. Flower farming is a huge industry, and I am so surprised by the people that don't realize how much business there is in flower. When I say I sell flowers, they all think, shoot, how many flowers could you sell? How often does somebody need a bouquet on their table? Well, it is billions of dollars a year just in North America alone. That is a huge industry. And 80% of those flowers are coming from distant lands, meaning out of country. And that is just a flip from over like 40 years ago when it was the opposite of that. Well, actually, maybe a little longer than that. 40 years ago is when this really started. Flowers were coming from outside of country. But years before that, when you had a flower shop, you know, your grower literally was in the neighborhood, just like our food used to be local, right? But here's the good news, y'all. The locally grown movement industry is making a comeback, and I am witnessing it. So what is the potentials of flower farming? Well, the potential, because I get this question all the time, well, how much can I make? Well, that's like asking anybody in any business, how much can I make? The potential is in the hands of the farmer, meaning it depends on how good a business person you are, how big you're growing, what you're doing, who your market is. I mean, I could go on, but there is excellent potential in it. But I will say to you, it can create a supplemental income, or you can work it towards having a full-time farming position. I have several friends that are full-time, putting the bread on the table, supports their family business. So there are lots of sales opportunities for flower farmers. So let's just have a look at a flash of the flower farming life. Top of my list, half of being a flower farmer is being a business person. And I think so many people forget that. And that is a really big part of being successful. Then you have to be flexible and expect the unexpected. And then something else that people don't realize is you really have to have thick skin to be a business owner, because let me tell you, not everybody's happy, even if it's not your fault. And you have to be mature and grown up enough to not respond emotionally, to not get hurt feelings, because guess what, y'all? It is all about business. I use the example of that you cannot wear your feelings on your sleeve. This is business. It is black and white. You have to check your emotions at the door, and that is hard. And I had to practice that for many, many years. And I come from a strong entrepreneurial family, and my husband owns a service business, a plumbing company, and they have to deal with issues all the time, and I've learned so much from them. So that is a normal learning curve. And then another thing, if you decide to dip your toe in and take the plunge, you have to learn about biting your tongue, about how hard you work when people are just gushing that you have the best job in the world, because you do have the best job in the world if you become a flower farmer. But nobody knows what it's like behind the scenes, and that goes for every job and every position. But I do find that people romanticize flower farming a lot. So here's kind of my take on how I just really think of and deal with my flower farm. So I try to make the most of what I have. I mean, I had to do that in the beginning. I wasn't in a position to really go out and invest in equipment. My husband did so happen to come with a walk-behind tiller, so I did already have that, but I wasn't in a position to do a lot of other stuff right off the bat. And I just really wanted to find a way to create income doing something I love, being outside all day, listening to birds, having my dogs outside with me. And I really wanted flower farming to be part of my life, not to consume my life, right? I mean, do you think that's a dream? It's not. I literally am a Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. flower farmer. I mean, I work full time. That's a full working week, right? That's like 8.5 hours a day if you take time for a lunch. And I worked hard to get to that point. I just want to say this here. I find that most people are just looking to supplement the income for their family and to do something they love, right? And part of that for me is I want to make my home and farm a place I want to be. And that means that I enhance my landscape with things that I can cut from. I want my farm to be nice and neat and something that I'm proud of. And I also believe that all of these practices that I follow make me a lean flower farmer, but it's about getting the most out of the least amount of space and doing it the most economically. And that is what my goal always is these days. But let me tell you, that's not how I started out, right? In the beginning, I just jumped in and started farming. I had read a couple of magazine articles and I had read some vegetable farming books, but I just really didn't understand what I needed to do to be successful, not just a farmer and not just a business person, but the steps to take to really become a flower farmer. I wasted so much time and money and energy trying to do it all and growing it all. So what happened is I was overdoing it and underdoing it all at the same time. It was a long, hard road. So I just want to share that I understand where folks are coming from, that is just really how most of us start out that way. But I want to share with you how going beyond this test could go for you if you find that flower farming is for you. And I really know that many of you, I follow a lot of flower farmers on social media, and y'all follow me back. And you know that my passion is to really share and learn. And I really want to fast forward those people that want to be flower farmers past those blunders that most of us, they're traps, y'all, because flowers are beautiful. We want to grow them all. It's so easy to be pulled into that, to be pulled into overdoing it. And I really for you to learn the foundations of business and farming that can lead you anywhere. So what that means, what I'm trying to say is that you have to have a strong foundation. It doesn't matter if you aspire to be a farmer florist or to do farmers markets or to do weddings, or if you just want to sell to event people. It doesn't matter which path you find. We all have to have the foundation of a strong business foundation, farming, how you're going to grow this stuff, what you can grow, learn your limits. and then to really drill down to your niche that fits you, right? And this is so important. This is something I really enjoyed talking about in flower farming school, was how to become a business professional. That's part of that when I was talking about having thick skin. You have to set the bar, and you have to be the professional in all areas, even when people aren't looking. And that is a big part of success. And when you follow these steps, it stacks the odds for you to be the 1 in 3 businesses that survive the first year. And so, like 60% of businesses that start out don't ever make it to the 2nd or 3rd year. Then once you get through that, when you get up to 7 or 8 years, that same sifting happens again. People are tired, they aren't making money, and they're just feel like they're working. I just spoke to somebody this past week that said they can no longer work 80 hours a week. Well, you do not have to do that. And I want to say that after speaking to hundreds and hundreds of flower farmers, I'm not sure why I am sure why people feel the pressure to go from a home gardener to a super farmer like in a season. Y'all, that is not the way it works. That is not sustainable. That is just not possible to do that successfully. Because here's the way that I explain it to people when they ask me, when folks that are just starting out ask me questions, I say to them, that is like you being in elementary school and you're asking me about graduate work projects. So think about it that way. We have to go to elementary school to learn how to start a business and how to get our farm started. Then we're going to go to middle school. Think about middle school, y'all. Gets a little more challenging. You're selling stuff and you're facing all these problems and weather and all this stuff. Then you move on to high school, and then you're just so glad to go to college. That takes years. That takes really, really years. And what I learned doing this slowly and organically is what I share in flower farming school. I want flower farming for me to be a part of my life, not run my life. I want to enjoy it. I want to use it to beautify my property. I think a lot of us are in that situation. We want to make our place that dream that people think flower farms are. They dream of fields and acres of flowers. Well, that's not really true, right, for flower farming, but you can make your place really, really beautiful. I want to close with saying that in spite of seed starting trouble, bugs, wilting flowers, pricing wars, taxes and insurance, you can become a successful flower farmer. I'm telling you, you can if you're determined and if you equip yourself with the right process. And that's the journey that I want to walk through with you. Success. I really hope that my video, What It Takes to Be a Flower Farmer, has you excited about becoming a flower farmer. And now that you know it's possible to start flower farming with confidence amongst like-minded people, and you don't have to have a tractor or acres or a greenhouse, what I have really learned from my journey is that success is accessible to anyone willing to do the work that is required. So friends, I hope this has inspired you and that you see all the opportunities around you. And I love sharing all this with you.